Welcome back to End Time TV's On the Edge. I'm Dr. Jonas Moses. This hour we are talking about science, technology, engineering, and math preparedness. Are we preparing our students for careers properly in these areas in the global economy? In the 21st century workforce, we're no longer thinking about competition within the United States or North America. We're thinking about global competition, and I think these are issues in all countries. Truly, for educators in all countries, this has to be of concern. I want you to remember that you can join this conversation live. If you're watching the program between noon and 1 o'clock Central Standard Time in the United States, you can send us an email at ask@endtimetv.com. Someone is monitoring that email, and if you have a question for us, we will address that on air, if at all possible. So do stay tuned on that, and please, if you have anything to interject, don't hesitate to do so. In fact, I do have a question from a viewer who is a high school math educator and college admissions counselor in Baltimore, Maryland, in a school for students with learning disabilities. And he had two questions, and I want to go ahead and ask you if you would address this. And it's kind of a two-parter. And the question is, are we headed toward chemistry being a required course? Right now, in most high schools, it is an elective, and therefore currently an option for the student. And the second half of the question is, if you only have time as a student, if you're thinking about this as a student, if you only have time in your curriculum for a physics course or a chemistry course, which one would you take? Jerry?
If you only have time in your curriculum for a choice between chemistry and physics, you obviously must be in the United States, where it's an either-or proposition. I suspect in the past 20 years that it's probably turned 180 degrees to where chemistry is probably more important at this point because of the growing importance of biochemistry and the biological sciences. So
you would say that 20 years ago it would have been physics and now it's chemistry?
I think so.
I'd agree with that, but the premise of the question is sad. Just what you were talking about. We should not accept that question. We should become outraged with that question. There are.
Well, remember, this is a question from somebody who's a math educator.
I understand that. And I agree with that person with his frustrations of this picking. But that goes back to the essential problem that you're talking about today, where you're saying either or. There are three distinct branches of science, and students need to be exposed to those three different types of sciences. And to neglect one is doing an inservice to any students. So you need a biological science, you need a chemical science, you need a physical science. We cannot accept as a country saying students need to choose. They have to be exposed to all three.
An interesting side of that is, do you know why we teach biology in the freshman year and chemistry after biology and physics after chemistry?
Well, honestly, I don't, because I think that that's counter to, at least in my experience as a scientist, what I would have needed to know. I needed to know the math first, then I needed to know the chemistry and the physics, because they all are components of the biological sciences.
Absolutely. And the reason that it is taught that way in high school is because way back when high school curricula were being put together 100 years ago, they appeared in alphabetical order. And that's the only reason that they're taught in that way. And the same thing for algebra, geometry.
We also then tried to validate that by talking about, oh, you need algebra to take chemistry, or you need this to take that. And when you go back and say to people, look, this is the reason why they were first established, they take it for granted that there was some actual reasoning behind it. There wasn't. And the concept has to be all three. All three in elementary, and Jerry, that's what has been talking about. It can't be just at high school. It has to start where all three branches of science are exposed from elementary grades on. So this is just a continuum.
I agree. I think back to a number of years ago when I was just out of college and in St. Louis, Missouri. I had the opportunity to teach a class of second graders, and I taught them cell biology. And this was in a private school, kind of a community school setting, and the headmaster of the school was very dubious about a scientist coming in and teaching her second graders cell biology. She said, "Oh, well, this is way over their heads." And so the first time I went and taught the class, I drew a big picture of a cell, kind of a boxy-looking cell, and spent the hour naming the parts of the cell. And at the end, last 10 minutes, I randomly asked kids around the class. I erased all the names, and I said, "What's this?" And one by one, boom, 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 they knew. And the headmaster was standing at the back of the room, stunned, absolutely stunned.
You raised the bar.
And I think that this perhaps is maybe part of the point that you were trying to make before we took our last commercial break. Maybe the bar isn't there.
That's right. As pleased as I am about the fact that fourth graders in the United States are performing better than they did 4 years ago. They're only performing better in 9 states. In only 3 of those 9 states is the performance consistent across the three different branches of science. And in spite of the fact that we're making some headway with fourth graders in the United States, we're still absolutely losing ground to the fourth grade international peers.
And speaking, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And the reason for that is elementary teachers are scared. They're afraid to teach science in the elementary grades. They only are expected to take 1 or 2 science courses in their entire undergraduate program. And so how can you expect high-quality science going on at the elementary level when we don't prepare those teachers at our universities to teach high-quality science?
Jerry, you had mentioned during the last commercial break something about TIMS, Trends in International Mathematics and Science Study.
Yes. Every 4 years, the United States participates in an international study, and the analogy that I use when I look at numbers that shows the United States lagging behind Latvia and Hungary and other just incredibly small nations is we're like a frog where the water is changing temperature so slowly that we don't recognize that it's perilous. That you can look people in the eye and say the United States is 20th in math or 20th in science internationally behind China and Taipei and Hong Kong, and doesn't seem to bother anybody. That's a problem.
It is.
We're going to go to a commercial break. I want to hold that thought. When we come back, you are watching On the Edge, Conversations in Medical Education. I'm Dr. Jonas Moses. We have a special report this hour. Stay with us. This is important information.